My opening scene 1111 belongs to the sci-fi/fantasy genre, and this isn't the most conventional sci-fi/fantasy opening, and this is because most of the time they start very fast-paced and action-y. The shots are all edited very quickly, and the camera work is often quite jumpy when it's really intense and stuff. Whereas for mine, I had mostly long, slow shots showing the different areas and things to reflect the mundane, boring lifestyle. And so this is quite different to what can normally be seen, such as the opening of Beautiful Creatures, where it talks about a kind of dream/nightmare he's been having, and it shows the girl that he will meet later. As I mentioned, the long shots were meant to reflect how unsatisfied she was with her life and how she was wishing for something more exciting to happen. And even though it is quite slow, at the very end there is the shot where she opens her eyes, and that kind of shows the sci-fi/fantasy vibe because she has the purple contacts, which clearly indicates something supernatural has occurred. So in that sense, the audience is told what genre it belongs to. The long shots resemble that of the opening of the film Gone Girl, where there's lots of slow shots of the area that they live in, with the credits, much like in my film, although it belongs to a different genre. Gone Girl is of the thriller genre, which shows how my opening doesn't really fit the conventions and forms of a normal sci-fi/fantasy opening. It leans more towards a different genre, which isn't totally clear, but the ending shows exactly what genre it belongs to. Having said that, it can be compared to the film Breaking Dawn Part 2, where in the opening there's lots of long shots showing where they live, and it's all edited and with special effects, which make it a little more intense, but still it's got a similar idea of just showing the location and the area where they live in. Also, a similar feature from my film to the film Breaking Dawn Part 2 is that there is a close-up of the main character Bella opening her eyes, and in that film it shows how she has now become a vampire, which is quite different to mine because it's not very clear what happened to my character. But this idea is quite similar, as both show how something supernatural has occurred through the use of showing the eyes. And I used a similar sound when the eyes open to create a dramatic impact. Another way I used conventions and forms of this genre was through the use of a voiceover. This can commonly be seen in many films like this, such as Beautiful Creatures, which opens with the main character doing a voiceover of the recurring dream he's been having. My voiceover is a lot less dramatic and doesn't immediately imply a very fast-paced, intense film, but it still is a convention often seen. Another way in which you can see how the opening challenges the conventions is because normally in many films it can be seen that we immediately see what would be the problem or supernatural thing that's being brought in, like the idea of someone being a witch or a vampire or something like that. It's normally made very clear from the beginning what exactly is the thing that's happening to them. However, in my opening, we are only introduced briefly to the idea of this supernatural thing happening to her at the very end, and it's not very clear, so it's not as straightforward and obvious as to what has happened. So this challenges conventions as it does not give very much explanation into what has happened. However, I did this in order to create a cliffhanger, in order to make the audience want to continue watching. The location was filmed in London in Brentford, and I filmed it on a very gloomy, rainy day in order to reflect the mundane atmosphere, and it seems quite dull and unexciting, and the weather and the house added to this effect, as the house was also very old-fashioned, meaning that it didn't seem very interesting, it seemed quite old. The clothing of my main character was very simple. She was just wearing a flannel and black trousers. I did this for two purposes: to show how she's just wearing something quite ordinary and relaxed, for the part where it shows how like her life is dissatisfying to her. This made it seem like nothing was really going on, like she didn't really have anything to dress up for specifically. Another reason I chose this clothing was because in many films where there's a female protagonist who something clearly happens to, they tend to have to be able to move around really easily, so it would be inconvenient and unrealistic to be like dressed up in their situation. So that fits the genre, as it can be seen in many other films that they wear relatively simple and easygoing clothing so that they can move around easily. The title of my film is 11:11. Although it doesn't exactly scream out what genre it is, I think it fits the genre rather well because it is related to the whole aspect of the film, the idea of 11:11 Make-A-Wish, and often numbers have been used in different films and TV shows as a title. The title font of the film adds to show what kind of genre it is because it is a font from a digital clock and I made it bright blue, and I feel like the film would then seem less like comedy or romance and lean over towards the sci-fi or thriller or action genre. As I mentioned earlier, the camera work and editing don't really reflect the conventions of the genre that clearly. However, it could be said towards the end of the film with the shots of the eyes, it may lean more towards the editing seen in most films because the shots are shorter, and also when added with the audio and everything they seem much more intense.